This is a special keyword in JavaScript, and it can refer to any objects. It can refer to window, it can refer to user defined objects, or how we are calling the method. It also depends upon that one as well, and also depends on lambda expressions, whether we are running the JavaScript in strict mode or not, whether we are running in node or whether we are running in browser. So there are a lot of things to consider when we are working with this, and that's why it is very confusing. But don't worry, in this video I will explain in detail and in very simple manner how this works. So let's get started. Okay, so let us see how this works in global scope and top level functions. So here we have got one function f1, and just above that there is just one statement console.log, and we are trying to print this. So this is basically a special variable, we can say, and it is a reference type of variable, so it will point to object. Now we don't know what object is going to point. It can be window, it can be any other object basically. So let us find out where this is pointing in the global scope, and a simple function as well. So inside the function we are trying to print as well. So I'm gonna open this in the browser, and as you can see here in the global scope, it is pointing to this window object, and inside the function f1 it is pointing to the same object window. So that is how it behaves in the browser. So if you just try to use this at the top level or inside the function, it will point to the browser. But remember that if you are calling the function this way, then this will point to window. If you call the function in a different way using, say for example, call, apply, bind, then this will point to any other object that you can imagine. Now let us see how this behaves when we use the strict mode. So at the top you can see use strict I have used, and the code is exactly similar to the one that we have seen before. We are just trying to print this at the top level and inside the function. So let us see. Previously this was pointing to window object, but since we are using strict, it will behave differently. So let us go there. So you can see in this time around, since we are using strict mode of JavaScript, in global scope it is still pointing to window, but inside the function it is pointing to undefined. So that means it is behaving differently. Now here is another example where we are trying to use this in the user object. So user1 object has got these properties x, y and z, and all these are functions. All we are doing is just printing this inside this function. So this in method of user1, then this in lambda of user1. So remember that this is a lambda and this is a normal function, and this z is also a lambda. So let us see what happens when we invoke these methods. User1 dot x, that is how you can invoke these methods. All we are doing is just calling these methods x, y, z, and let us see what is the output for this one. So you can see we call three methods, and it is in the first method it is pointing to object. User1 object it is referring to actually. Then there is in the lambda it is pointing to window, and in the wrapped lambda it is pointing to window, because the last two methods are exactly similar. We haven't done any difference here. We are just using lambda. Now if you noticed in this y and z case, what happened is that this is pointing to window. Okay, but what if we want this to point to user1 object? So in that case what you will have to do is you will have to wrap this lambda. Okay, so before that let me explain you that in lambda functions what happens is this is lexically bound. That means it doesn't matter how we have called. So y and z methods we call using this user object, right? So generally this should point to the user1 object, but for the lambda or the arrow functions behave differently. They point to the lexical scope. So this user1 object is inside global scope, so that's why this will point to window. But if you want to make it point to the user1 object, you can do that using immediately invoked function expression. So what we are going to do is we are going to invoke this particular function immediately. Just put this thing in the parenthesis and then call this function. So you can wrap the function, immediately call it and put it inside the another function. So that way if you call the z now, what will happen is that this will refer to user1 object. So if you run it now, you can see this in the wrap lambda is referring to the our main user1 object, but in case of this y, it is still referring to the window object because it is a lambda expression. So that is how it behaves in the literal object syntax. Now let us see how it works in constructor function. So in the constructor we have got this f1 is like a constructor function, and we have created one object here, o3, and we are calling this x and y methods. So if you call this x method, what happens is that this will point to o3, okay, and if you call y, what will happen is that it will point to f1 object itself, o3 object itself, because it is lexically bound inside this function, right? So in this case it will point to f1 object. So you can see in both cases it is pointing to the f1 object. Apart from the examples that we have seen for this can also point to different objects based upon how it is called. Like in previous video I have shown you how we can bind the object with the different functions. So an object can call any kind of function, right? So if we refer this in that particular function, it can refer to different object based upon how it is called, and that's why this is very confusing. So to clear the confusion, what you can do is you can just log that object, this object. So just to console.log this, and then see what object this is pointing to. Once you know, like once you get an idea like where this object is, like where this variable is pointing to, like to which object, and if it is the desired object, then it is all good. But if it is not the desired object, then you can either use the lambda expressions, or you can use the immediately invoked function expressions, or you can use the call apply bind to bind that function to specific object so that the desired object will be available in your function. So that's how you can clear your confusion about this. In the next video I will be talking about how this works in Node.js. Now again, in browser this works in a different way. In Node.js environment it works in different way, but some of the concepts will be similar, but there is a little bit of caveats that you need to remember. So I will see you in next video. Till then, enjoy your time.